So thank you for coming to our virtual presentation of Making Design Memoirs, Understanding and Honoring Difficult Experiences. I'm Laura Devendorf.
I'm Kristina Andersen.
And I'm Aisling Kelliher.
So this is a research project that's rooted in our experience of becoming mothers, which we want to maybe unpack a little bit to say that it was really rooted in this discomfort or this dissonance that emerged between how we thought things should be and how things really were.
So this became for us a matter of really interrogating this idea of shoulding, whether it's we hear it from popular press or from consumer products or even from ourselves, our own internalized sense of who I should be as opposed to who I am, and how those two images in many ways don't necessarily align with each other very well and cause us a lot of kind of emotional turmoil in many ways. So we began to tunnel down through this a little bit more. Again, the notion of becoming a mother, if you look at images in movies or in television shows, this idea of the mother is happy, that we're delighted to be caring for another individual. We're remarkably attached to them, and that we're able to have children in the first place, as opposed to actually feeling like, well, sometimes I want to run away from these things I've made, and I want space just for myself, or I'd rather go back to the before time when they weren't here. How do you reconcile this should and this is, and not in a way that's trying to resolve something, but can I kind of sit within the space of these kind of conflicting emotions and work through them? So we began to see this as more like a liminal spectrum of like, yes, there's these hard emotions here, these felt experiences, and perhaps there's a way I can't really speak of it, but maybe we can design our way into that space.
So that means that we wanted to start thinking about these experiences as something we could address subjectively, so that we could think about not necessarily about documenting them or turning them into specific problem. Rather, we wanted to really find a way to address how they felt. And in order to start this process, we started making individual objects. And these objects were about feelings. So this idea of devising designs in an effort to make about what you cannot speak about. So we call these things design memoirs. And we use the term memoirs to indicate this subjective personal angle. We wanted to make sure that we didn't think of it as a way of documenting a particular process. We wanted it to be very clear that some of these feelings might be temporary. They might be just how it was today, and they might be subjective and colored by other things, and we might feel differently over time. And in this, we were leaning on the notions of memoirs from literature, and this idea of privileging the felt over the factual. So this, we felt that this allowed us to start interrogating our own biases, our own positions, and also allowed us to speak back to design narratives as a way to insist on these complex grayscales, but also to insist that sometimes we have to address the wholeness of these experiences rather than some particular little individual aspect that, we should really fix.
Our process in writing this paper was really to look back at this set of practices that we did and start to really formulate how we could understand these as knowledge objects or of relevance to design research. And this evolved by thinking about the overall process and how we gleaned meaning from them, which involved, of course, a process of making, and then a process of sharing, and then a process of diffracting, which we'll talk about in more detail later. The first project is one of the memoirs that I contributed, called The Nipple Poncho, or The Exoskeleton for Sucking. And we're showing a few of the examples here, but there are more in the paper if you have time to look at that. But the exoskeleton for sucking was really representing this tension I felt between how I feel like I should be feeling, that I should be this, oasis of caregiving, and how I really felt kind of deficient in my ability to do that. And at many points, I felt like I was physically wasting away because of the fluids I'm giving to other people, both emotionally and physically in the form of breast milk. And so these concepts were really inspired by reading more about the spacesuit and thinking of the spacesuit as a kind of body architecture, and the way that it once kind of keeps your body safe from harsh environments, but also represents what specifically about those environments is harsh in its form. And so in that sense, each of these crocheted pacifier nipples was supposed to be to protect me from this environment where my children need me, where I'm expected to be a caregiving teacher among the university, and to really satiate everyone while showing the ridiculousness of that kind of feeling or demand.
I made a series of pockets for this project, and I'm going to show a couple of them here. This particular pocket is the madness pocket. It is the madness inherent in repeating a task, expecting different outcomes. It's the attempt of making a rectilinear pattern reconcile itself along a curved edge, and it's done in a pocket that is already sewn into a dress. Tries to capture that feeling of finding that certain things are impossible but must be done nevertheless, so must be attempted. We wake up every morning and we do it again, and it doesn't ever maybe work out, but there is a repetitive desire to having another go, and this futile attempt of reconciling these patterns along this curve, which of course don't work, but also don't not work, in a sense. This is a pocket I made for my mother. She was suffering from heart problems, and this is a pocket for a heart monitor. It was made as a sort of magic talisman, I guess. I was trying to implore her to stay, which turned out to be a weak magic. All of the pockets that I made were really addressing the notion of being both a daughter and a mother to and finding some sort of inspiration, that triangular relationship. And this is a pocket I made for my daughter, who's older than the daughters of my co-authors. And for us in this moment, it's all about independence and about handing over power and about allowing a young person to take freedom. And this pocket is barely a pocket. It's some money sewn into the collar of a shirt. It is both hidden and not hidden, and it's a symbolic transfer of power in the form of money.
So that theme of hidden and unhidden is kind of prevalent in the design memoir that I also put together. And so in this case, I've created a medal, and it's a medal that makes visible a process that for several years, almost 2 years of my life, was completely hidden, but extremely complicated. So it involved lots and lots of medicines. I was doing secondary fertility treatments, a lot of travel, a lot of injecting, a lot of keeping spreadsheets, and it's not a pleasant experience. But several years after the fact, I kind of have reconciled with it and feel like I would like to commemorate this. Much as one receives a medal for kind of having gone through something, I'm like, I endured this and I want some form of recognition for it. And so I created this fairly simple medal that is multi-jet printed, so it has elements inside and also elements on the outside embossed and kind of demanding attention. So in this case, it has what was originally very annoying medical diagnosis that constantly reminded me that I was very old. But also I'm using that as a badge of honor now. I'm like, yes, I did this, and fortunately it worked, and I did manage to have a second child. And then I just also wanted to recognize, what am I supposed to do with this? Do I wear it out? Or sometimes I do. Sometimes I carry it with me in my pocket for complicated experiences, because it has a beautiful tacky, tactile component to the embossed letters. But mostly it sits beside my bed alongside images of the most precious things to me. And so I keep it there. And I just like it to be near me.
So one of the things that happened when we made these things was that it made us understand each other better, and it made us feel not like it had happened to us, but it made us have a better understanding of how it may have felt. but we still wanted to engage more deeply with each other's experiences. And while we kept these individual objects as individual objects, it was difficult. We found ourselves being too respectful of each other's experience. We couldn't speak to them, but it hadn't happened to us. So we decided to try and find a way of grappling with them, and we came up with this notion of diffracting them, designing one object through another object. And as an example, here is a beginning of a description of the pocket and the badge. And the badge is sort of, in a broader sense, is this notion of a recognition of a hardship, of a bravery done, a bravery survived. And the pocket is really about smuggling tools of power, smuggling coping mechanisms with you in your everyday life. So one way of thinking about the combination of the metal and the pocket is, as was literally just described, this idea of thinking about these objects of pride as coming along with us, as being there, as reminders of strength, as reminders of things we have done. And we did 3 diffractive readings of the different objects that you can read in the paper. But one of the things that came out of this was that we started feeling that we could start designing with each other's objects. We could start fabulating around these things, even if they weren't ours.
So continuing from that, and as we're writing this paper and reflecting, we started to see this space between all of our diffractions that we started labeling as resonances. And they had these qualities or these ways of vibrating off each other that were interesting in the relationship to how design research is typically practiced. So in one, we saw that these diffractions and the memoirs in and of themselves really allowed for contradiction to take place and for multiple things that you would think were mutually exclusive to hang together, such as the feeling of wanting to be a warrior and expressing pride, while also making a garment for yourself that's necessarily about how vulnerable you are. And those two things as being really what colors the experience, instead of it having been one or the other, and that they're existing really at the same time. And in this, they also allowed for struggle. And so we didn't find any ways where we felt like we had to make our histories better or find the silver lining or smile through all the experiences. Mine in particular, I felt did have quite a bit of rage and frustration in the construction, but also in sort of shouting and wanting people to see how I felt. And marking that is really a positive experience, or something that is worthy of sharing and worthy of taking note of and rendering in new ways. So as we concluded the paper, we really took a broader look over the project as a whole and asked ourselves, what did we do? What did we do here? And what we want to sort of end with is to suggest that design memoirs are for designers by designers. And that when we undertook this project, it was very critical that we did it through the lens of our practices as designers and as people who we felt very close with and friendly with and became more friendly with. But even through that, we had this contract where any of us could sort of leave the collaboration at any time, no questions asked, because you don't want somebody to be required to share things in this way. It just wouldn't be ethical. What they also do is they traded this idea of understanding each other for just walking alongside each other in experiences that, yes, were different, but were in many ways something that we felt like we could see in each other and at least witness for each other. And the final thing we see is that these objects might not be a contribution in design as, Twitter will start making exoskeletons at some point or something like that, but that they're emotional objects that might just stick in your brain, and that the next time you're presented with a project about supporting mothers, you might take an extra moment to consider the wholeness and the rawness and the turbulence and the struggle of that experience and honor it instead of trying to sort of get rid of it right away. Thank you to our families, to our collaborators, to everyone who helped us with this project. And thank you all for watching our talk.